A date has been set for the hearing of a Kansas City man in prison for 42 years for murders that prosecutors now say he didn't commit. KCUR's Luke Martin has more.
On August 12th and 13th, Kevin Strickland's legal team and the state attorney general's office will present opposing arguments in a DeKalb County court. Then a judge will decide whether to release Strickland. Tricia Bushnell is executive director of the Midwest Innocence Project, which is handling the case.
We will be putting on all of the evidence that we believe shows his innocence, and the evidence that the prosecutor and others have also reviewed so that the court can see that and make its determination as well.
Strickland was charged with capital murder in 1979. Governor Mike Parson has cast doubt on Strickland's innocence, but is expected to sign a bill on Wednesday that would let Jackson County prosecutors pursue his exoneration. For KCUR 89.3, I'm Luke Martin.
Jackson County prosecutors expect to file paperwork today that could lead to the exoneration of Kevin Strickland, who's been in prison for 43 years for a crime that prosecutors now say he didn't commit. As KCUR's Luke Martin explains, the move is the result of a new law that went into effect Saturday, about a week after the death of Strickland's mother.
It's been 112 days since the Jackson County prosecutor first declared Strickland's innocence, and his older brother, L.R., is at a loss for why he's still behind bars.
This has just been a nightmare every single day of the entire 43 years.
The siblings and their mother, L.R. says, were very close, Kevin included.
When he was taken away to prison, that really was like a traumatic situation. And it hasn't been the same since.
The family got a boost in May when prosecutor Jean Peters Baker released the findings of a months-long review of evidence in the case.
And today, my job is to apologize.
Here's Baker at a press conference at the time.
It is important to recognize when the system has made wrongs. And what we did in this case was wrong. So to Mr. Strickland, I am profoundly sorry.
Strickland has always maintained his innocence, but Baker's statement got attention because it was the prosecutor's office that charged him with a triple murder back in 1978. Strickland was 18 at the time, a black man convicted by an all-white jury and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for half a century. The murders were gruesome. 3 victims bound and shot in the head. A fourth, Cynthia Douglas, survived by playing dead. Douglas would become critical to the conviction, the lone eyewitness. Immediately after the attack, she identified 2 of the gunmen, who both pleaded guilty. But she only got a glance at a third suspect, and she didn't name Strickland, who she knew personally, until the next day, after a friend suggested him. For 31 years, Kevin Strickland's conviction was of little consequence to authorities, until 2009, when Douglas recanted her testimony. By then, the 2 who pleaded guilty had also said Strickland wasn't there. In the months since Baker announced Strickland's innocence, federal prosecutors in Missouri's Western District, Jackson County's presiding judge, and state and local lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have said Strickland should be released. Yet the Missouri Supreme Court declined to hear Strickland's case, and Governor Mike Parson, a former sheriff, made clear it's not a priority. Parson could pardon Strickland at any time, but cast doubt on his innocence during an interview with 41 Action News in June.
I'm not convinced that I'm willing to put other people at risk if you're not right.
Instead, Parson and Attorney General Eric Schmidt have repeatedly argued that Strickland got his day in court. In a recent filing, the AG wrote that a jury found Strickland guilty after a fair trial. For more than 40 years since, he wrote, Strickland has worked to evade responsibility. Last month, though, the governor signed a new law giving local prosecutors tools to challenge wrongful convictions in the courts that handed them down. Tricia Rojo Bushnell, director of the Midwest Innocence Project, says it gives her team representing Strickland new options.
We have to intrinsically be hopeful and optimistic people to think that decades of injustice can be unraveled, but I think we also have to be incredibly realistic because we know how many times people have lost.
So Bushnell keeps her expectations minimal. She just hopes the Jackson County judge recognizes the need to resolve things quickly. The Strickland siblings are hopeful too, but heartbroken over the death last week of Rosetta Thornton, their mother. L.R. had to tell his brother they wouldn't be able to wait for his release to bury her.
And our mother meant a tremendous amount to us. We were very, very close.
LR says it will likely be the third family funeral his brother has missed. Strickland's father died in 2011, followed by one of his sisters about a year later.
He puts up a good face. It seems like he's handling it well, but I'm not inside the individual to know how he truly feels.
A timetable has not been set for Strickland's new petition, but LR says the family, which has a GoFundMe to help pay for the funeral, will continue to do the best they can to get by. For KCUR 89.3, I'm Luke Martin.
Once again, the date for a hearing in the innocence case of Kevin Strickland is up in the air. Here's KCUR's Luke Martin.
Missouri's Attorney General's office has called into question the impartiality of Judge Kevin Harrell and the entire Jackson County Circuit Court, so they're asking for a change in venue. It's yet another delay in Strickland's hearing, which was bogged down just yesterday when the AG said they didn't have enough time to prepare. Jackson County Prosecutor Jean Peters Baker appeared agitated by their appeals for further delay, which were granted by a higher court.
Frustrating is the right word. That's what this is. You would think that 41 years is enough time for someone to investigate the claim.
A hearing on the recusal has been set for September 13th. No date was set for an evidentiary hearing.
That was KCUR's Luke Martin.
The family of Kevin Strickland gathered this weekend to mourn the loss of their mother. Because of delays from the Missouri Attorney General's office, Strickland was not there. KCUR's Luke Martin explains.
Strickland was instead behind bars, where he has been for the last 43 years, despite prosecutors in his case saying since May that he is innocent. Strickland's brother, LR, says the situation is inconceivable.
There's no reason that my brother should be in prison in the first place.
A Jackson County judge delayed proceedings on Thursday that could have freed Strickland because Attorney General Eric Schmidt claimed his office wasn't given enough time to prepare. Instead, the judge will decide next week whether to recuse himself from the case. A new hearing date has not been set. For KCUR 89.3, I'm Luke Martin.
Another twist this morning in the Kevin Strickland innocence case. The Missouri Supreme Court has reassigned the case to a semi-retired judge from Clay County. As Strickland sits in prison for a murder prosecutors now say he didn't commit. Here's KCUR's Luke Martin.
In yesterday's ruling, Chief Justice Paul Wilson said the previous judge hadn't done anything inappropriate, but he prohibited all Jackson County judges from presiding to, quote, avoid even the appearance of partiality or impropriety. Attorney General Eric Schmidt requested the recusal after the Jackson County presiding judge sent an email backing Strickland's clemency application. The disqualified court is the same one that handed down Strickland's conviction in 1979. Strickland's pleas have bounced from court to court since June. Dates for the hearing were set for next week, but the ruling will likely delay that because a new judge will have to rehear every motion considered by the previous one. For KCUR 89.3, I'm Luke Martin.
After months of courtroom delays, a judge will hear evidence in the innocence petition of Kevin Strickland this week. As KCUR's Luke Martin reports, the hearing comes after a long and winding legal process.
The evidentiary hearing is set for Monday and Tuesday. Judge James Welsh will preside, but he won't be the first judge to consider Kevin Strickland's appeals, and Strickland's day in court has already been delayed twice.
As you all know, I'm new to it, and so I'm starting with a fresh outlook.
That's Welsh from a conference with attorneys last month. He was assigned to the case by the Missouri Supreme Court after an unprecedented ruling that recused all Jackson County judges. It's the same jurisdiction that handled Strickland's original conviction back in 1979.
Anything that's transpired I don't know about, so you'll have to bring me up to date on it if it's relevant.
Strickland was 18 at the time. After his first trial ended in a hung jury, he was later convicted by an all-white jury of triple murder. Strickland, who is African American, was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Now 62, Strickland has always maintained his innocence. In May, after a months-long review, Jackson County Prosecutor Jean Peters Baker announced that she agreed.
Most importantly, though, I'm advocating that this man must be freed immediately.
For years, prosecutors in Missouri couldn't revisit convictions like Strickland's, but over the summer, a new law gave them that power, and Baker moved quickly to petition a judge. According to her filings, analysis as recent as last year shows fingerprints on the shotgun used in the crime are not Strickland's, and two men who pleaded guilty to the killings have said Strickland wasn't there. Their affidavits are likely to be key in this week's hearing. Then there's the eyewitness testimony of Cynthia Douglas, who survived the attack by playing dead, while her close friend, Sherry Black, died right next to her.
Cindy was never the same after that.
Eric Wesson is now publisher of the Kansas City Call, but was a reporter when Douglas approached him twice with doubts. She wanted to recant.
She knew me and trusted me from high school, and because we knew each other personally, she came and talked to me for guidance on what she should do and how she should help Kevin out.
Wesson is expected to testify in court this week. Douglas told him she was never sure it was Strickland, and she felt rushed by investigators to identify him.
Her thinking was cloudy. She was very traumatized by it because her and Sherry Black were like sisters.
Wesson says Douglas tried repeatedly to contact police and prosecutors. In a court motion, prosecutors wrote that Douglas, after years of torment over what to do about the mistake, asked the Midwest Innocence Project for help in 2009. Not surprisingly, Strickland's situation has become politicized. Missouri Governor Mike Parson has said he isn't convinced of Strickland's innocence, and State Attorney General Eric Schmitt, a leading contender for Roy Blunt's soon-to-be vacant U.S. Senate seat, has repeatedly fought efforts to free Strickland. Schmidt's office has asked for multiple delays and gotten a new judge assigned to the hearing, who has expanded the Attorney General's role in the proceedings. Assistant Attorney General Andrew Crane led those efforts during a pre-hearing conference last month.
We don't think it would be appropriate for the court to set a hearing at this time.
At the time, Crane said his office had not had enough time to talk to everyone involved in the case and examine all the evidence.
And we've tried to be cognizant of Mr. Strickland's interest in concluding these hearings quickly and tried to work with the other parties to get that done. And frankly, that's just not happened.
It's an agonizing process that has confounded Strickland. He talked about his disappointment last month with CBS News.
I hold fast to my faith that God ain't gonna let me die in this jail, but I'm losing belief that the system is gonna work.
In August, while Strickland awaited a hearing, his mother died. Hers was the third family funeral he's missed while behind bars.
There's nothing that they could do to make that right. My whole life is a memory of prison. I don't know anything else.
The hearing begins today and is scheduled through tomorrow. It's unknown when Judge Welsh will issue a ruling. For KCUR 89.3, I'm Luke Martin.
For months, Jackson County Prosecutor Jean Peters Baker has said that Kevin Strickland, who is African American, is innocent of the triple murder that put him behind bars in 1978. KCUR's Luke Martin reports their case for his exoneration rests in part on the hairstyle in Strickland's booking photo.
You don't have to know a lot about black hair, but you have to know a little to know these are not fresh braids.
That's Jean Peters Baker during closing arguments last week. She's talking about Kevin Strickland's braids as they appear in his mugshot taken the day after the murders. Strickland's hair is in about 10 or 12 sections. Each section is braided into what's called a plait, about a pinky thick. The lines between each plait, where the scalp is exposed, are fuzzy looking. All this matters because the witness who identified him at the crime scene told police that Strickland was wearing his hair natural, that is, in a short afro. During last week's hearing, Strickland, whose nickname is Nardi, read part of the police report filed at the time where the witness told cops what she saw.
The only difference in Nardi's physical appearance at this time, different from when I saw him on 4/25/78, is the clothing he is wearing, and he now has his hair braided.
That little detail, that his hair was natural Tuesday night but braided Wednesday morning, is incredibly important, says retired Judge Ladaris Hazard Cordell, especially considering Strickland was convicted by an all-white jury.
There is no question that a black person raised in a black community who was either a judge or an attorney on either side or a juror would absolutely know right away that something was wrong.
Hazard Cordell was the first African-American woman on the Superior Court of Northern California, and she recently wrote a book called Her Honor about the strengths and flaws of the criminal legal system. The first case she ever heard, as a pro tem judge while still assistant dean of Stanford Law, was a small claims dispute between two black women.
One was the hair stylist and the other was a person who received the style. And she would not pay the hairstylist because she felt that her cornrows were not done well.
So Hazard Cordell asked the litigants if she could inspect the evidence in question.
If the braiding was done well, then there wouldn't be a lot of hair outside of the braids. It wouldn't look fuzzy looking. It would look very neat and very clean. And her hair was not neat and clean.
Hazard Cordell ruled that a partial payment was in order. The exchange, she says, drove home the importance of representational diversity on the bench. According to data from the American Constitution Society, just 2% of judges in Kansas were women of color and 9% were men of color. In Missouri, a 2019 report found 3% of judges there were women of color, only 5% were men of color.
If this case had come before any of these other judges, especially most of them were white males, they wouldn't have had a clue.
To get a clue, I went to Braid Heaven, run by Shelley and Glynis Smith, sisters from Guyana who have been doing hair in Kansas City, Kansas for more than 15 years.
Hi.
I had them take a look at Strickland's mugshot.
How old would you say that braid job is?
I would say at least a week.
At least a week.
At least a week.
And the reason why I would say at least a week is because you can see the plait growing away from the scalp. So that's new growth. And you cannot have new growth within 24 hours.
That halo of frizz around Strickland's head, Glynis says it's irrelevant.
You can frizz it up. You can.
Yeah, as soon as you get it done, you can frizz it up if you want to.
You can pull a few strands out and make it look frizzy, but you cannot create new growth. That's just a natural process.
Strickland's case, of course, is about more than just hair. There's the lack of fingerprints putting him at the scene, and the two men who pleaded guilty to the murders saying Strickland wasn't there. Prosecutor Jean Peters Baker says the woman who identified Strickland in that lineup wanted to recant. The witness thought she made a mistake, and her family testified that it haunted her until she died in 2015. According to one of her staffers, Baker, who is white, is also the one who made Strickland's braids an issue. Years ago, Baker learned how to braid the hair of a family member who was black. What she learned back then could end up having major implications for Kevin Strickland. For KCUR 89.3, I'm Luke Martin.
Kevin Strickland is now free. KCUR's Luke Martin reports a judge today exonerated the Kansas City man who had spent 43 years in prison for a 1978 triple murder.
When the moment came, Strickland told reporters gathered outside the prison that he was watching a soap opera. Then a news flash came across the screen, and he learned Judge James Welsh had set aside his decades-old conviction.
And I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. Other inmates started hollering, and I heard them beating on walls and carrying on.
Strickland was convicted as an 18-year-old of a triple murder in South Kansas City, but there was never any physical evidence linking him to the crime. The key witness against him tried for years to recant her testimony. She told friends and family that police at the time pressured her into identifying Strickland. Strickland's is the longest wrongful imprisonment in Missouri and among the longest in the country.
That was KCUR's Luke Martin reporting. This is KCUR 89.3.